So you're thinking about moving to Bend, Oregon? Well, hang on a second. It's not all leprechauns and unicorns up here in Bend, Oregon. There are some negatives with living up here too. Now, if you're coming from Seattle, from Portland, from Eugene, or from Texas somewhere, or especially anywhere in California, this is the majority of where our clients that we're working with are coming from. There is a bit of a culture shock upon arrival, or should I say a climate shock. We want you to be prepared for that before you get here, so that's why we made this video. This is 8 cons of living in Bend, Oregon. Now, if this video sounds like it's for you, then stick around, because we're going to be getting after it right now. Hey, if this is your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living, breathing, eating, sleeping, working, playing, the good and the bad of living in Bend, Oregon, then subscribe to the channel and tap that notification bell below so you can be the first to know about the current market in Bend, Oregon. My name's Ryan and I've lived in Bend for over 30 years. My partner Zach and I, we get calls and texts every day from people just like you looking for help on making their move to Bend, Oregon. Whether you're moving in 9 days or 90 days, give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, or even set up a Zoom meeting. We'd be happy to help you make that smooth move to Bend, Oregon, or anywhere nearby. So the cat's out of the bag with Bend. It's a pretty cool place to live. It's a pretty cool place to visit as well. And that's just something that's never gonna change. Bend is on the map now. It's a destination for people that wanna visit in the summertime, the wintertime, frankly, any time of the year. And with all those visitors that we get, we end up having a large percentage of them wind up moving here and they call it home too. So that cycle will continue. I first moved here in 1991 when the population sign read 25,000 people. And now we're up to 100 and we're probably a little bit beyond that. So Bend is just gonna continue to grow and we should just embrace it. But with that being said, there's gonna be some pain, some growing pains that go along with it. There are cons that are associated with living in Bend, and that's what this video today is gonna be dedicated to. Now, should keep in mind that some of these cons don't have anything to do with Bend's population boom. They would exist whether we had 10,000 people or whether we had 100,000 or 500,000 people even. So with that being said, let's just jump right in. Our first con on today's list of 8 cons of living in Bend, Oregon is remote proximity to nothing. Bend is actually a very remote town when it comes to where we are in the state of Oregon. We're in the middle of the state, that's where Bend is located, and the vast majority of the population lives on the west side of the state. And in between us and the west side of the state is a large mountain range called the Cascade Mountain Range, and that's a big divider. So the majority of the population is in Portland, it's in Salem, it's in Eugene, and it goes all the way down south. It follows the I-5 corridor from the very north end of the state to the very south end of the state. That I-5 starts in Canada, goes all the way down to Mexico. So number 2 is going to be the cost of living. Now that could be a good thing or a bad thing for you depending on where you're coming from. If you're a local, that's probably not such a good thing because the cost of living, you're not used to it being this high, and the median home price being at where it is today, the highest it's ever been at $775,000. Obviously that's going to be a shocker, but if you're coming from out of the area, maybe you're coming from Seattle, or maybe you're coming from California, where that cost of living was even higher over there, you're going to be coming to a place where it could be refreshing for you, and the cost of living is actually less than where you came from. But point being is that for locals here in this area, it's been really difficult the last couple of years, especially with the housing prices going up at such an alarming rate. It's forced a lot of people out of the market and they have to look elsewhere, whether it's locally, like in Redmond or in La Pine, or maybe they even move out of the area altogether. But the housing prices certainly are forcing more people out of the market and forcing them into other areas in terms of living, whether that's renting or that's moving out of the area. But the rental market certainly is very, very competitive as a result of the exceeding prices in homes in this area and the cost of living. Everything considered, inflation in general is just definitely a con, but that's also what's going on all over the country. But for some reason here in town, what we're seeing is that the housing prices are certainly the biggest reason why it's hurting people in their ability to live here in this town. Number 3, job opportunities. Bend historically has not had a huge or great job market. It's getting better as more and more people move into this town, and that's something that's very refreshing. Historically speaking, we were a logging town if we go way back, logging and ranching, and then over the last 25 to 30 years, it's been more of a service-based, tourism-based town. And so we were catering to those people that were coming in for the summertime and for the wintertime, the ski area up on Mount Bachelor, and we were basically working for those people. It was a tourism first town, but now that's not necessarily the case. There are emerging industries in this town, but you still most likely need to be an entrepreneur, a business owner of some sort if you really want to get ahead and you want to be able to afford the cost of living in this town. Con number 4, Bend is overcrowded by tourism. The summertime is absolutely crazy. There are so many people that wind up visiting here, and it's not uncommon for every motel room and just about every Airbnb to be completely booked during a weekend. And that is actually a consistent thing that goes on throughout the course of a summer. Bend is awesome, and there's so many things to do, but yet that draws a lot of people to the point where there's really nothing you can do with all the people here. Restaurants, you can count on a 2-hour wait no matter where you're going, especially in the summertime. The river is absolutely packed. There's people everywhere. The traffic is just getting more and more, and that has a lot to do with all the people that are here visiting. And who can blame them? They're on vacation. They love the area, but at the same time, if you're a local that lives here, you get to really feel the brunt of all of that. And that's the fact that there are so many people in this town, and you're competing not just with locals for services, but you're also competing with the tourists as well, the people from out of town, and they bring their money with them and they're willing to pay top dollar for just about anything. But the point is that the overcrowdedness of this town is absolutely crazy, especially in the summertime. But you know what? It happens in all the other times of year as well. There's people here all the time. If our population sign says 100,000 people, there's probably 125 to 150,000 people in this town at any given time. And you can feel it on the roads, you can feel it at the restaurants, you can feel it at the stores. It's just the way it is, and that's just what we have to deal with. Con number 5, wildfires and smoke. Now, Bend is in the high desert. We are technically a desert. We don't get a lot of rainfall and a lot of precipitation each year, so therefore it's a very dry climate. Now, in the summertime, it's especially dry because we don't get much rain at all. And what happens is we wind up getting a lot of thunderstorms, lightning strikes in the area, and that can start fires. And it's not uncommon for us every summer to have a couple of fires in the state of Oregon, not necessarily directly threatening Bend, but they're burning around the state. Maybe they're in California, they could be in Washington nearby, but we are in the West, and it's not just Oregon, but it's also anywhere out west where it's dry in the summertime, and we are highly susceptible to forest fires. Wildland fires happen every single year, but lately, the last 5 or 6 years, it seemed like the smoke has lingered in this town a lot more than it used to. And now I've lived here long enough to remember 2 fires that directly threatened this town. The 1992 Aubrey Hall fire swept through the west side of Bend, and the 1996 Skeleton fire swept through the east side of Bend. And those were the 2 big fires that directly threatened this town. I was here for both of those. But since then, the big scare has been the smoke that lingers in the months of August and in the months of September, sometimes to the point where it disrupts outdoor activity. Now, when school starts in September and fall sports starts in the middle of August, especially for high school kids, some of these kids and some of these programs have to completely abandon the program for days on end while letting the smoke clear out of the area. That is certainly a big con regarding living in Bend, but not just for the sake of cancellations, but for the sake of our health too. When the API, sometimes on your weather app, you're going to see hazardous smoke warnings, and that is certainly something to consider, because if you're outside for too long, it can definitely be hazardous to your health. And the way the climate is, it seems like more and more every single year we're going to have smoke to deal with, and that's something that's just not going to go away. That's something that we have no control over. Con number 6 is traffic and construction on the roadways. Now, some of you guys are going to laugh at this, but traffic in Bend is actually getting excessive to the point where, okay, we can complain about it a little bit, but I know that some of you guys are coming from Seattle, you're coming from LA, you're coming from the Bay Area, and we don't have any idea what traffic really is like compared to those big cities. And while you're correct in that regard, Bend's infrastructure isn't exactly designed for the amount of people that we have in it right now. I mean, let's be honest, there's only 3 roads that go through Bend that are dual laned and allow for people to pass each other going the same direction. We've got 3rd Street, it's the original Highway 97, it goes right through town. We have the Parkway as well, that's kind of the freeway, but we have stoplights at both ends of the Parkway, which kind of creates some congestion there. And then of course on the east side and going to the west, we have Greenwood Avenue, otherwise known as Highway 20. That's a 2-lane road so that people can pass each other and there's more through traffic. But the reality is most of the roads in town are going to be single lane, and they're all headed by a roundabout, and sometimes those roundabouts get backed up, and frankly it feels like we have more people in this town than we actually should or do based off of the amount of traffic that's going on. Now, a lot of people travel from Redmond to Bend and Bend to Redmond for work each day, and so Highway 97 in between Bend and Redmond can be pretty backed up as well, especially if there's ever an accident. Then you can pretty much expect there's going to be at least a 30-minute to maybe an hour-long or more delay going into Redmond or into Bend if something happened in between the two towns on the highway. And don't expect the alternative routes to be much better, because those things get backed up immediately as well. So traffic in Bend can be a bit of a headache, albeit it's not as bad as other places. Typically, it still takes about 15 to 20 minutes, even in the worst cases, to get from point A to point B. But it's something to consider, and it's something that we have to look at, because we're going to keep getting bigger and bigger in terms of this town, and it's just going to keep getting more and more apparent that traffic is a problem. Con number 7, Bend is still a small town. And so when I say that it's a con, I like the fact that it still feels kind of like a small town, yet it's still growing. But the reason why I bring it up as a con is that it's a small town to a lot of people that relocate from bigger areas and bigger cities from surrounding states. It's a bigger city to people that have been here for a long time, and they don't like that. So a lot of the locals are irked about the fact that Bend is growing up and it's losing its very, very small curb appeal that it used to have back in the 80s and 90s, and that it's becoming more and more of a city. Yet it's still small, but Bend to a lot of people is now becoming a big, big town. And that is something that is problematic, because a lot of people are on one side or the other side of the fence when it comes to what Bend really is. Is Bend a small town, or is Bend a big town? The point is that the people that are irked by the fact that Bend is growing so fast think it's a big town, when in reality, the people that are moving in from out of the area feel like they're moving into a very small town. So thus, there could be some disagreements when it comes to locals versus new relocation types people, but that's just the way it's going to be with any town. Bend is a small town, yes it is. There are some limitations with it, but at the same time, it's also big enough to basically take care of just about anything that you need. Con number 8, we finally made it. Winter. Now, of course, there's winter in Bend. We all know that. We're at 3,600 feet. We're in the mountains. We get snowfall every single year. But do people that relocate to Bend actually expect Bend to have a winter that drags on until May and into June? Now, that isn't necessarily the case every year, but we can have spurts of winter-like weather all the way into mid-June. And that's something that a lot of people that move into Bend from other areas, especially from California and Texas, don't necessarily expect their first year. And that can be a big con, especially for people that like to garden, people that like to go on trips, people that like to play outdoor sports. If your kids play sports like golf, or they like to play baseball or tennis in the springtime, you can certainly plan on taking a blanket and preparing for winter-like weather for the majority of those seasons, because the winter can drag on for months on end, and we can have spurts of warm weather in February, in March, in April, where unseasoned gardeners will dust off all their gardening equipment and get ready to plant their tomatoes in their outdoor gardens. And then all of a sudden, after a couple more days, it goes right back to wintertime, and everything that they worked on is gone for another 2 months. So you'll learn quickly. The winters in Bend are very, very sporadic and very unpredictable, but generally speaking, we know what to expect. Obviously, January, February, and March are going to be the official winter months, but even into April and May, sometimes June, it can feel very much like winter all the way until the 4th of July. So there you have it. Those are the 8 cons of living in Bend, Oregon. Now, they really weren't that bad, were they? I mean, living in Bend is pretty awesome. It's just a great place to grow up. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to visit. Even if there are some negatives associated with it, just like any town in the world, there's going to be a couple things that are not so great. You can deal with them, and that's the case with Bend. So anyway, I hope you got some value out of this video. I want to thank you for watching, and I will plan on seeing you on the next video.